Well, good evening and welcome to a special edition of Tracking the Tropics, your weekly in-depth look at the hurricane season. I'm CBS 17 meteorologist Brian Hutton Jr. in Raleigh, North Carolina. We're currently dealing with a few storms, including what was Hurricane Hanna, which is now weakened to a tropical depression, and of course Hurricane Douglas as well out in the Pacific. Tonight we will hear from a couple of meteorologists, one being from WGNL, our sister station in New Orleans, Louisiana, Jacob Bradford and Brooke Lazier, who will detail what the rest of the Gulf Coast felt in terms of Hanna's impacts, and our own CBS 17 meteorologist Melissa Lefevre will also give us a recap of what's happened so far in this very busy 2020 hurricane season. But first, let's get to Hurricane Douglas, which is now threatening the Hawaiian Islands. It has weakened. It was a major hurricane at one point. It's now a Category 1 hurricane as it passes just to the north of a couple of the islands here in the Hawaiian Island chain. You can see Honolulu sitting here and Kahului north of Hilo as well from the Big Island, and the current track is actually west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. As long as it keeps this kind of northwestern jog, it should avoid most of the islands, at least the main islands of the Hawaiian chain. Of course, there's about 5,000 of them that stretch out to sea, but the ones that we all think of when you think of Hawaii, it should avoid. You notice it looks very good on a satellite picture here. It still has a well-defined eye wall picking up from the Hawaiian radar sites, and you can definitely see that northwestern jog continuing. Good news, of course, for the Big Island. That's a direct impact there would have caused massive problems, not so much necessarily from the wind, but from mudslides. Of course, the Hawaiian Islands are all volcanic, and anytime you get a lot of rain over a very quick period, that can cause a lot of mudslides. So that's kind of the worst case scenario in Hawaii. Thankfully, Douglas has bypassed most of those islands, and the strongest winds have remained offshore. We'll see if that trend continues, and it should just miss Honolulu as well. So definitely good news for our friends out in the Pacific. Of course, though, it's still a hurricane, making a very close call to the Hawaiian Islands early in the season. It is a Category 1. Winds are 85 miles per hour. For reference point, again, it's about 50 miles north of Kahului in Hawaii there, passing to the north of Maui as well. Definitely good news there. Here on the Atlantic side of the basin, this is now what's left of Tropical Depression Hanna. It was downgraded a little earlier this evening. Of course, it made landfall yesterday at Padre Island, Texas, with winds of 90 miles per hour. Now winds are down to 35 miles per hour. It's moving west-southwest at 9, and you can notice that's basically been this consistent trend since it came on shore yesterday evening, almost exactly 24 hours ago. A gust up to 45, and again, it's continuing that southward jog just over top now of the city of Monterey in Mexico, and as it continues moving west-southwest, it's starting to interact now with the Rocky Mountains of Mexico, and that's going to tear apart the circulation. You notice you really can't find that well-defined circulation anymore, especially the western and the southern edge are gone. Still bringing some heavy rain, though, in the portions of the Rio Grande River Valley, but most of the heavy rain has moved away out of Corpus Christi, which saw a lot of rain. And in fact, the highest wind gust reported from the National Weather Service Corpus Christi, 81 miles per hour as Hanna moved through. So definitely caused some problems there. Again, good news is improving conditions for South Texas. But again, still a lot of rain to deal with. Here's the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center as we go through about tomorrow afternoon at worst. Really, Hanna may dissipate before that point. And basically continue its track and just fizzle out. Again, it's weakening and that trend will continue. Obviously, though, still some flash flooding and mudslide concerns in Mexico as well. But the worst of Hanna is over. It will be slowly improving conditions for South Texas and also parts of Mexico as we head through about the next 24 hours or so. Now our attention starts to shift a little further to the west. Normally in July, we really don't look at what we call the main development region of the Atlantic, which is basically everything to the east of the Lesser Antilles, from Puerto Rico down towards Trinidad and Tobago and points eastward. Usually we don't look there yet. But you notice these are sea surface temperatures measured by buoys that are out in the ocean, and it's extremely warm across not just the Atlantic, but the Gulf as well. Of course, where Hanna was, sea surface temperatures still in the middle 80s. You want sea surface temperatures of about 80 degrees or warmer for hurricane development. And, well, we see that not just in the Gulf, we see that just off the U.S. southeast coastline, around Puerto Rico, even out into the middle portions of the Atlantic. Temperatures in the 80s. That's not good news as we're watching a system that's heading in that direction. As all this warm water sitting out here, again, temperatures about 80 or better as you head towards the Lesser Antilles. And you know, you can probably barely make this out because it's the same color as the color background here, but there's this nice faint kind of red envelope here. That's tied to the next thing that we're watching that's going to potentially spell problems for the United States. Here's a broad view of the tropical Atlantic. Again, Hanna's over Mexico. There's a big cluster here in the southern Caribbean that was Tropical Storm Gonzalo. That's fizzled out. That's no longer a concern. But you notice this big healthy wave that's out here over the eastern Atlantic. That's the next thing we're concerned with. The National Hurricane Center gives this an 80% chance of developing. That's up from the 8 o'clock advisory or the 8 o'clock outlook from 70% a little earlier today over the next 2 days, and a 90% chance of developing over the next 5 days. So we may have our I-named storm by the time we make it to the middle of this week. We're again continuing to set records this season. Here's what the at least forecast is. This area of low pressure will continue moving off generally in a west-northwesterly direction, making it somewhere towards the Lesser Antilles, likely by the time we make it to about Thursday, Friday. And then from there are some real question marks as to where this thing goes. Now, first it has to develop. And regardless of what you kind of read or talk about, models do a very, very poor job of actually tracking a hurricane or a tropical system and how strong it's going to be until there's a close center of circulation. We don't have that yet, but some of our models grab the system again, bring it towards the Lesser Antilles, which is what the Hurricane Center comb there showed for us for their development area. And then some do bring this towards the Bahamas before it recurves out to sea. The question for us going forward as we head later this week and especially into this weekend is, where does this curve happen should this thing develop, which is a really good indication that this will develop at some point. Does it recurve out to sea and head out towards Bermuda? No problems for the U.S. except for some enhanced rip currents along the coastline. Does it make it a little closer to the Bahamas before it makes that turn? That could endanger the southeast U.S. seaboard. So this is definitely a system that we need to watch very carefully. The good news, we have plenty of time, as earliest estimates of this thing even getting close to the U.S. coastline would not be until next Monday, so 8 days from now. Next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe. So plenty of time to watch, but this is definitely something we're going to be keeping our eyes on over the next few days. Again, there's a lot of questions of where this goes and how strong this is going to be. But this is definitely something that we want to keep our eyes on, and we will, of course, be doing that here, not just your local TV station, but here as well, and tracking the tropics as we head forward through about the next week and a half. Well, we now went from having named storms in May to having some of the earliest storms on record, and no matter what else happens during this hurricane season, it's been a historic one. CBS 17 Storm Team meteorologist Melissa Lefevre takes you through what you've seen in the first 8 weeks of the Atlantic hurricane season as we inch closer to August. Take a look.
We're not even a full 2 months into the official 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, but records continue to be broken this year. Now remember, the official season in the Atlantic runs from June 1st through November 30th. We've had 8 named storms so far this year, beginning the season early with tropical storms Arthur and Bertha back in May. Cristobal formed in early June, making it the earliest 3rd named storm. Then Edouard, Faye, and Gonzalo were also the record earliest 5th, 6th, and 7th named storms. Hanna now makes 8 and the earliest 8th named storm. To put that in perspective, this time last year, we were only on our B named storm. And now Hanna is the first hurricane of the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. The average first hurricane is August 10th. Now, although Gonzalo is now gone, when we had Gonzalo and Hanna, here's a fact for you. It was the first time that the Atlantic had simultaneous July named storms since Beryl and Chris back in 2018. Another fact, we've had 4 named storms in the Atlantic since July 6th. That is the most Atlantic named storms to form between July 6th and July 23rd on record. The old record was 3, and that was set back in 1997. So we've had 4 named storms this month, and we've got another one potentially on the horizon. That could set another record. The record is 5 named storms in July, and that was set in 2005. Time will tell, and we'll be here to tell you.
Well, thank you, Melissa, for that. And of course, what's been in the news the last couple of days has been Hanna. And as Hanna drifted towards southern Texas, northern Gulf Coast cities like New Orleans were fortunate not to receive the heaviest part of this storm. Unfortunately, New Orleans and other parts of southeast Louisiana dealt with flooded streets as the outer bands of Hanna caused thunderstorms across the entire area. Next, you'll hear from WGNO's Jacob Bradford and Brooke Lazier down in New Orleans for a look at how Hanna impacted Louisiana.
I'm WGNO's Jacob Bradford with what Hanna is doing in the New Orleans area. When the storms rolled in earlier Sunday, New Orleans East saw some flooding on Lake Forest Boulevard. Water in the street made it difficult for drivers. They had to drive carefully through the flooded streets, but as time went on, the water did go down. And in the Gentilly neighborhood, the 610 West ramp flooded. Neighbors say this is a problem spot every time it rains. The ramp was open to drivers, but as you can see from this video, it was taking the water a while to drain. Meteorologist Brooke Laser has how Hanna is impacting southeast Louisiana.
Good evening, Jacob. Thankfully, rain in our local area has finally subsided after a couple of days of nonstop downpours. But this is a system that's continually progressing inland in Texas, causing not only flooding, but also a few tornado watches remaining in effect. And it's not tough to see the bands which are presenting a severe weather threat right now. The area under a 2 out of 5 risk for severe weather. As far as the progression on this system, now weakened as a tropical depression based off of wind speeds, and this is only going to continue weakening over the next 24 hours as we get into Monday at a 5-mile-per-hour wind speed or so. Precipitable water is really a reason we were seeing moisture accumulation across the southeast, including in Louisiana. And you can see that that low really worked its way onto the Louisiana coastline, and that meant we were able to have a lot more rain in our area. But the good news is that flooding was minimal here locally as compared to areas where this is still making a very large impact. Our flash flood risk is going to remain in effect until tomorrow, and we'll see rain in our area for the next couple of days. But fortunately for us locally, most storms will be below severe limits. That's going to continue being the case tomorrow as well. Many spots already seeing between 1.5 and 2.5 inches, some even seeing locally higher amounts from 4 to 10 inches in small locations. Over the course of the next couple of days, we could see even more rain, an additional 3 to 6 inches in some spots. For WGNO News, I'm Brooke Laser.
Brooke and Jacob, thank you so much for providing that insight there from the Bayou City, and thank you for joining us for tonight's special edition of Tracking the Tropics. Remember, normally we are here every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time during the Atlantic hurricane season, and as needed, just like tonight, we appreciate you spending part of your night with us live here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm Brian Hutton Jr. Have a great rest of your Sunday.